The velvet rope looked soft until it became a border. Step aside. The man saying it wore a navy blazer with a gold pin shaped like wings. His smile was thin, practiced, and sharp around the edges. Behind him, the glass doors to the VIP lounge reflected the terminal lights like a calm ocean. Quiet inside, chaos outside. The woman in front of him didn't step back. She stood with her carry-on beside her heel like a loyal dog. Silver streaked her hair in an elegant twist. Her coat was simple, tailored, the kind you didn't notice until you realized it fit like certainty. A leather folder hugged her side, held the way some people hold a prayer. Her eyes stayed level. "I have access," she said gently. "My boarding pass is right there." The attendant didn't look at it. He looked at her face, then her hands, then the curve of her shoulders, as if he could calculate belonging from posture alone. He leaned closer, lowering his voice in a way that made it more insulting, not less. "This lounge is for premium guests. First class, members, corporate, clients." The word corporate landed like a door being shut. A few feet away, a family slowed their luggage. A man with a baseball cap paused mid-sip of coffee. Someone's rolling suitcase stopped, wheels squeaking in protest. People didn't want to watch. They watched anyway. The woman reached into her bag with calm precision and pulled out her phone. She didn't wave it. She didn't shove it. She simply angled the screen toward him. "Scan it," she said. He didn't. His chin lifted. His smile tightened. "I'm trying to help you avoid embarrassment." A laugh popped from somewhere in the crowd. Quick, nervous. Embarrassment had already entered the room, and it wasn't wearing her coat. The attendant straightened and turned his head toward the security podium near the lounge entrance. His voice sharpened just enough for others to hear. "Security, can I get assistance at the lounge, please?" The woman didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her tone. She only exhaled, slow, like she was practicing patience the way other people practiced anger. A young woman to the side lifted her phone higher. The tiny red light on the screen glowed like a heartbeat. "Yo," the young woman whispered to her friend, excitement rising. "I'm live." A man in a crisp suit stepped closer, looking the older woman up and down with the same careless certainty the attendant had. He pointed at the rope as if the rope had spoken. He said, "There's a line for general seating. You can't just." "I'm not asking to just anything," she replied, still calm. "I'm asking you to follow your own policy." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The security guard arrived with heavy steps and a heavier belt. He was tall, broad, with the kind of expression you wore when you were already tired of a problem you hadn't bothered to understand. "What's going on?" he asked. The attendant's relief was visible. He pointed without even trying to hide the accusation. "She's refusing to leave. She's trying to get into the VIP lounge without proper access, and she's becoming disruptive." Disruptive. The word floated between them like smoke, like a warning, like a trap. The guard's gaze hardened. He said, "If you don't move away from the entrance, I can escort you out of this area." "Escort me where?" she asked. A ripple went through the crowd. "Don't do this," someone murmured, maybe to her, maybe to themselves. The young woman's live-stream chat began to crawl faster. The screen reflected in her glasses. Hearts, fire emojis, angry faces. The guard took a step closer. "You heard me," he said. "You're blocking access." The older woman glanced at the rope, then at the open space behind her. She wasn't blocking anything. She wasn't even standing in the way. But logic wasn't in charge. Authority was. Her fingers tightened briefly on the handle of her carry-on. Not from fear, from restraint. "I'm not here to create a scene," she said quietly. "I'm here to catch a flight." The attendant made a small, dramatic sigh. "Then do that," he said. "Go to your gate like everyone else." "Everyone else," she repeated, almost softly enough to miss. "Right." The guard's hand moved to his radio. "You have 10 seconds, he said. "Move, or I'll have to remove you." 10 seconds. In an airport full of thousands, time narrowed down to a countdown for one woman's dignity. The crowd leaned in like a single creature. The livestream camera stayed steady, hungry, ready. The woman's gaze shifted, Not to the guard, not to the attendant. Past them, to the lounge doors, to the reflection, to the people watching, and then, finally, to the watch on her wrist. She checked it once, just once. Then she looked up and said something that made the air change. "That's interesting." The guard frowned. "What's interesting?" She didn't answer him. She simply reached into her leather folder and slid out a single sheet of paper, crisp and clean, the kind of document that didn't crumple because it had never been treated carelessly. She held it at chest height, not as a weapon, as a fact. A woman in the crowd whispered, "What is that?" The older woman met the attendant's eyes with a steady, almost tender look. "You should probably read your emails," she said. The attendant scoffed. "I don't have time." A phone near the guard's shoulder buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. The guard glanced down at his own device as if it had suddenly become heavier. His face shifted, not to fear, to confusion, to the first crack in certainty. The live stream chat exploded. "What's happening? Is this a setup?" "Bro," his face. Wait. The woman didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She only stood there, calm as a lighthouse, while the tide began to turn. And just as the guard opened his mouth to speak again, the loudspeaker above the terminal chimed. Sharp, official, cutting through the noise. "Attention, all airport management and senior operations staff." The announcement began. "Please report immediately to conference room A for an urgent briefing regarding today's acquisition closing." Every head turned. Even the guards. Even the attendants. The words hung in the air like a match held over gasoline. Acquisition closing. The older woman's eyes didn't move. Her voice came out soft, almost merciful. 10 seconds, she said, is going to feel very long for you in about 1 minute. And that's when the first person in the crowd stopped recording to stare, because they suddenly realized they weren't watching a random humiliation. They were watching the moment before the world flipped upside down. That morning, the city had woken up like it always did, hungry and loud and pretending it wasn't tired. She woke up before it. Her hotel room curtains were still closed, but she didn't need daylight to know what time it was. Her body kept time the way a compass keeps north, quietly, faithfully, even when the world was spinning. She sat on the edge of the bed and placed her feet on the carpet. 1 breath. 2. Then she stood. She moved through her routine with a tenderness that came from years of taking care of herself in a world that expected her to be strong without being human. In the bathroom mirror, she looked at her face, not critically, not with vanity, but like she was greeting an old friend. There were lines at the corners of her eyes from laughter she had fought to keep. There were lines on her forehead from decisions that had cost her sleep. Her hair was silvered now, but she wore it like a crown she hadn't stolen, one she'd earned. On the desk beside her laptop were 2 things, a small worn notebook and a single photo in a plain frame. The photo showed a younger version of her in a factory uniform, safety goggles pushed up on her head, one hand on a machine control panel. She was smiling in the picture, but her eyes were serious, even then. She picked up the frame and traced the edge with her thumb. In her mind, she heard the voice that had shaped her first understanding of power. Her mother. "Don't argue with people who don't want to see you," a mother used to say. "Build something so big they have to." She had been raised on jobs that broke backs and paid just enough to keep you coming back. She'd watched her mother work nights cleaning offices where executives left their coffee cups on desks like servants would appear by magic. She'd watched the way people spoke to her mother, like she was a shadow with hands. One winter, when the heater broke, her mother had wrapped towels at the windows and said, "We'll be warm again soon." They weren't warm for weeks. She learned early what the world did to you when it assumed you had no leverage. So she went after leverage the way some people go after love, with obsession. She studied in public libraries because home was too loud and too small for dreaming. She worked 3 jobs through college. She ate dinners made of peanut butter and pride. She applied for internships that never called back until she started adding one more line to her resume, measurable results. When she got her first corporate job, a supervisor told her she was surprisingly articulate. She smiled and wrote down everything he said, not to hate him, but to remember the type of man she'd need to outgrow. The first company she built was small, Industrial Sensors, maintenance tracking systems, boring to the world, vital to the people who kept airports, bridges, and power stations alive. She pitched in rooms where men interrupted her mid-sentence and then repeated her ideas as if they'd just invented them. She'd learned to pause, look at them, and say, "Thank you for repeating what I said," with a voice sweet enough to sting. She grew the company anyway. Slow, steady, relentless. Not because she wanted to prove something to strangers. Because she wanted a world where her mother never had to beg for heat again. Years later, after the company expanded, after the contract stacked, after the investors started calling her visionary once there was money attached to the word, she moved into infrastructure, real infrastructure. The bones of cities. The places everyone used but no one noticed until they failed. Airports were like that. People thought airports were just gates and planes and overpriced coffee. She knew better. Airports were power, movement, jobs, supply chains, emergencies, reunions, departures, and decisions that shaped entire regions. Airports were economies with runways. And today, she wasn't just catching a flight. Today was closing day. For months, her fame, quiet, disciplined, underestimated by competitors who didn't bother to learn her name, had been negotiating a complex purchase and operating agreement. There were councils, committees, votes, legal teams, lenders, labor agreements, federal compliance checklists, and a mountain of signatures that could bury a careless person alive. She loved it. Not the paperwork, the precision. Because precision was how you kept promises. She sat at the desk and opened her laptop. The inbox was already moving. Messages from counsel, updates from finance, a note from her operations lead, all parties confirmed. Conference room ready, security protocols in place. She typed back 3 words. "See you soon." Then she closed the laptop, snapped the leather folder shut, and stood in the stillness of the hotel room for a moment longer. She didn't pray. She didn't need to bargain with the universe. She simply reminded herself of what her mother's hands looked like when they were cracked from bleach in winter. And then she said, softly, as if speaking to that memory, "Not anymore." At the airport, she moved like someone who had learned how to be invisible when needed, and impossible to ignore when it mattered. She didn't travel with a parade. No entourage. No designer logos. No loud announcements of importance. Her assistant had offered to arrange private transport, lounge escorts, an entire bubble of comfort. She'd declined, not because she didn't deserve it, because she wanted to see, because she wanted to know what the world looked like for people who didn't walk through hidden doors. She passed a janitor pushing a cart and gave her a warm nod. The janitor nodded back, surprised. She saw a father carrying a sleepy child and stepped slightly to make room. She watched a young couple argue quietly near a charging station, their hands still touching even when their voices were sharp. Life was everywhere, and in all that life, she found herself drawn, without thinking, to one thing. The VIP lounge. Not for comfort, for quiet before a long day, for a place to review final documents before the meeting, for a moment of stillness. She approached the rope with her boarding pass ready, calm and prepared, like she had been her entire life. And then the attendant looked at her and decided, in less than a second, that she didn't belong. "You have 10 seconds, the guard repeated, voice louder now, like volume could turn assumption into truth. The crowd had thickened. The live stream had multiplied. Now there were at least 4 phones pointed at her, tiny glass rectangles capturing her face from different angles like a courtroom with no judge. A teenage boy whispered, "This is messed up." A woman with a stroller muttered, "Not again." The attendant crossed his arms, satisfied, performing authority as if he'd earned it. The suited bystander hovered nearby, still invested in being on the right side of whatever this was. The older woman remained still. The rope swung slightly from the air movement, swaying like a pendulum waiting to mark a verdict. The guard said, "I'm not going to ask again." She lifted her phone again. "Scan my pass." The guard glanced at it, then away. "That's not my job." "It's everyone's job to be accurate," she replied. A few people gasped at the calmness of it, not because it was loud, because it was unshakable. The attendant stepped forward, his voice coated in impatience. Look, you don't have the correct ticket. I see it all the time. People print something or screenshot something and think they can. I didn't screenshot anything, she said. Then what are you doing? He snapped. Because you're holding up our guests. Our guests. The words were possessive. Exclusive. A wall built out of syllables. The young woman filming zoomed in. Say it again, she murmured, half to herself, half to the internet. Say it again so they can hear. The guard's radio crackled. He pressed it. I need a supervisor. A pause. Then, supervisor en route. The crowd rustled as if anticipating fireworks. The older woman's gaze drifted up to the overhead monitors. Departures, arrivals, delays, life rearranging itself in rows of digital text. She checked her watch again. The guard noticed. You got somewhere to be. I do, she said. And you're choosing this. I'm choosing to stand where I'm allowed to stand, she replied. If that feels like a threat, you should ask yourself why. The suited bystander scoffed. Oh, come on. Don't make it about. He stopped, because she turned her head and looked at him. Not angry, not pleading, just present. And in her presence, his sentence died. The supervisor arrived with brisk steps. A woman in a black blazer, hair pulled tight, eyes scanning the scene with practiced fatigue. What's the issue? She asked. The attendant launched into his story. She's trying to get in without access, refusing to move, causing disruption. The supervisor looked at the older woman. Her gaze flicked to the carry-on, to the coat, to the calm expression. Then she said, May I see your credentials? At least she asked. The older woman handed over her boarding pass and membership card without hesitation. The supervisor took them, then didn't scan them. She stared at them as if she could tell authenticity by font. Then she handed them back. These can be forged, she said. The crowd reacted audibly, little bursts of disbelief. The older woman's voice remained steady. Then scan them. The supervisor's lips tightened. We don't scan every. Yes, you do, the older woman said. That's why you have a scanner. The supervisor glanced at the scanner, then away again, as if the machine had offended her. The livestream chat rolled faster, louder, crueler, kinder, all at once. This is racism. Why won't they scan? Someone tagged the airport. I swear if they touch her, Ms. Too Calm, I'd be swinging. The guard stepped in again, the line of his body blocking her path like a closing door. This is your last warning. The supervisor nodded. If you continue to refuse, we'll have to issue a trespass notice. A hush fell over the crowd. A trespass notice in an airport wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was humiliation with paperwork. It was a mark. The older woman blinked once, slowly. Then she looked at the supervisor with something like sadness. You're willing to trespass me, she said softly, without verifying anything. The supervisor's jaw clenched. We have policies. No, the older woman replied. You have instincts you call policies. That did it. The supervisor's face hardened. Security, escort her away. The guard reached for her arm. The crowd inhaled. Phones tilted upward. The young woman filming whispered, Oh my God, they're about to grab her. The older woman took a small step back, not in fear, but to keep her space intact. Do not touch me, she said, voice still calm, but now with steel beneath it. The guard froze for half a heartbeat. Then his hand kept moving, and that when a new voice cut through the air. Sharp, urgent, official. Stop. Everyone turned. A man in a charcoal suit was approaching fast, breathing hard, holding his phone up like it was a badge. Behind him, 2 women and another man followed, one with a lanyard marked Executive Operations, one with a tablet, one with a folder stamped with legal tabs. The man's face was pale. He looked at the supervisor, then the attendant, then the guard. Then his eyes landed on the older woman, and something in him collapsed. He said, voice cracking with sudden respect, We've been looking for you. The supervisor blinked. Who are you? The man swallowed. Director of Airport Operations. A murmur rippled. The attendant's posture shifted, uncertainty creeping in like cold water. The older woman didn't react. She simply lifted her chin slightly and said, "I'm right here." The director nodded quickly, almost desperately, then turned to the supervisor. "Why?" he asked, voice rising. "Is she being blocked from the lounge?" The supervisor tried to gather herself. "She doesn't have verified." "Scan it," the older woman said, gently. The director's eyes widened, like the simplest instruction was now the most painful. He snapped at the attendant. "Scan it. Now." The attendant hesitated. The director's voice dropped low. "Dangerous. Now." The attendant grabbed the scanner, hands suddenly clumsy, and scanned the pass. The machine beeped. Green. Accepted. Then it beeped again as the membership card scanned. Green. Accepted. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that arrives when a room realizes it has done something it cannot undo. The supervisor's face drained of color. The guard's hand fell back to his side. The live stream zoomed in on the attendant's eyes, wide, panicked. The director exhaled as if he'd been holding his breath for a year. He said again, "Quieter now. The acquisition team is waiting. Conference room A. They're ready to close." The older woman finally shifted her gaze toward the crowd, toward the phones, toward the recording that would outlive the moment. And then she asked one question that made the director flinch. "Did you hear the announcement?" He nodded. "Yes." "And did they?" she asked, nodding toward the supervisor and attendant. The director looked at them. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. Because everyone could feel it. The reversal was already happening. It just hadn't hit the ground yet. The older woman turned slightly, not fleeing the scene, owning it. She reached into her leather folder and pulled out the sheet again. The paper was a signature page. Names, titles, dates, and at the bottom, a bold line that read, "Purchaser Operating Authority, Marlowe Infrastructure Partners." The director's eyes darted to it like it was a live wire. The supervisor swallowed hard. "What is that?" The older woman held it up just enough for the nearest phones to catch it. "Closing documents," she said. "For the airport." A laugh sputtered from the suited bystander, disbelief tangled with embarrassment. "You're saying yo." "I'm saying," she interrupted gently, "that in less than an hour, my firm becomes the controlling operating partner of this airport." The words didn't explode. They sank. Heavy. Certain. The supervisor's mouth opened, then closed. The attendant's lips parted like he wanted to apologize and couldn't find the air. The guard's gaze dropped to the floor as if the tiles were suddenly fascinating. The director cleared his throat. The city council members, the lenders, and the legal teams, everyone's in place. We were told to escort you personally. He looked at the rope, at the scanner, at the crowd. "I didn't know," he admitted, voice raw with shame. The older woman's eyes softened, just slightly. "Not knowing isn't the problem," she said. "Assuming is." The supervisor found her voice brittle. This is some kind of misunderstanding. We can fix it. We can." The older woman's gaze sharpened, not cruel, but clear. "You already fixed it," she said, glancing at the scanner. "The machine did what you refused to do." The young woman filming whispered, almost reverent, "Oh my God." In the live stream, the comments turned into a flood. "She owns it. No way, run that back. They tried to trespass her. This is history. Somebody clip this now." The older woman stepped closer to the rope, and the attendant, without thinking, reached to unhook it. His hands shook. He tried to smile, but his face couldn't carry it. He stammered, I apologize for the inconvenience. Please, come right." She didn't move. She looked past him at the lounge doors and said, softly, "No." The word was quiet, but it was absolute. The attendant froze, caught between wanting to disappear and needing to perform service. The supervisor rushed in, voice suddenly syrupy. "We would be honored to have you inside. Complimentary." "No," the older woman repeated. Then she turned to the director. "Conference room A," she said. He nodded quickly. "Yes." She began to walk. Not fast, not triumphant, just forward. The crowd parted instinctively, like people stepping aside for something larger than themselves. As she passed, a man muttered, "I'm sorry," to her back. A woman whispered, "Thank you," with tears in her eyes like she needed to see this happen for reasons older than the moment. The supervisor stood frozen at the rope, watching her go as if watching a storm move away after realizing too late you should have built stronger walls. The older woman paused once, halfway down the corridor, and looked back. Every phone lifted, every breath held. She didn't point. She didn't insult. She didn't raise her voice. She simply said, "Keep recording." And then she turned and walked toward conference room A, toward the closing, toward the signatures that would seal not just a business deal, but a lesson the terminal would never forget. The fallout didn't arrive like thunder. It arrived like emails, like meetings, like the cold, procedural machinery of accountability that people only respected when it came with legal letterhead. By noon, the livestream clip was everywhere, edited into short segments, slowed down on the moment the scanner beeped green, looped on the announcement, acquisition closing. The airport's official social accounts tried to post a generic statement about valuing all guests. The comments buried it alive. People tagged news outlets, advocacy groups, city officials, airline partners, labor unions. Employees inside the airport whispered in break rooms and behind counters like they were discussing a crime scene. "Did you see her face? They tried to trespass her. I heard she's the buyer. No, she's the head of the whole firm. Can they fire them? They have to." In conference room A, the closing proceeded with brutal efficiency. Counsel read clauses. Signatures flowed. The city representative looked like he hadn't slept. The lenders smiled too widely. But when the older woman arrived, the room shifted. Not because she demanded it, because everyone knew the world was watching now. After the final signature, she stood, clasped her hands in front of her, and said, "Before we celebrate, we need to address what happened in the terminal." The director of operations cleared his throat. "We're initiating an internal review immediately." Her general counsel, calm, sharp, added, "We are preserving all footage and communications. Staff statements will be taken today." The city representative swallowed. "We will cooperate fully." The older woman didn't nod. She didn't smile. She asked, "What are the names of the individuals involved?" Silence. Not because they didn't know. Because speaking names felt like lighting a match. The director gave them. The attendant. The supervisor. The guard. Each name landed like a bell toll. By evening, all three were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Within 48 hours, the guard's private security contractor terminated his assignment and opened their own inquiry. The supervisor's corporate employer launched a formal investigation and suspended her access to airport property. The attendant was removed from customer-facing roles immediately and later dismissed, after review of prior complaints that had been minimized until now. There were statements from unions, too, some defending due process, some condemning the behavior, all acknowledging the tension between individual discipline and institutional rot. The airport's board convened an emergency meeting. Airline partners demanded assurances. A major carrier threatened to reconsider its lounge contract unless reforms were demonstrated quickly. A public relations firm was hired. A crisis management team assembled. But the internet didn't care about polished statements. The internet cared about the woman's face, calm under pressure. The internet cared about the words trespass notice and forged in our guests. And then came the part that hit like a punch to the stomach. Someone dug up older videos. Not as viral, not as clay, but clear enough. Other travelers, other confrontations, other moments where policy looked suspiciously like instinct. A pattern. And patterns don't get solved with one firing. They get solved with painful change, or they metastasize. When the older woman's fame released their official statement, it wasn't a performance. It was a blueprint. They announced an independent investigation led by an outside civil rights compliance team. They announced mandatory bias training with measurable follow-up audits. They announced that lounge access verification procedures would be standardized and enforced. Scan first, judge never. They announced a new traveler complaint system with transparent reporting and oversight. And then, quietly, they did something that felt heavier than any press release. They met with airport employees, the ones who cleaned the floors, loaded the baggage, guided wheelchairs, and worked late shifts keeping the place alive. They asked what they'd seen, what they'd endured, what they'd been told to swallow. Some people cried. Some people raged. Some people sat in silence, too tired to hope. The older woman listened, not as a savior, as someone who recognized the cost of being treated like you don't belong. Meanwhile, the supervisor, once so certain, sat at home reading her name in headlines, watching strangers dissect her tone, her posture, her refusal to scan. She tried to defend herself to a friend and heard her own words come back sounding cruel. The attendant's friend stopped answering texts. The guard's family asked what happened, and he couldn't say I was doing my job without feeling the lie scrape his throat raw. The consequences were realistic, not cinematic. They didn't end with one dramatic collapse. They ended with job losses, investigations, legal exposure, reputational damage, and the slow terror of realizing the world had seen what you did when you thought no one powerful was watching. But the heaviest consequence wasn't theirs. It was the airport's. Because now, everyone knew. And knowing changes things. A week later, the airport held a public forum in an auditorium that smelled like carpet cleaner and anxiety. Media lined the back row. Employees filled the seats. Community leaders sat with folded hands. A few of the travelers who had witnessed the confrontation attended too, faces still tight with memory. The older woman walked to the podium without applause. Not because people didn't want to clap, because they didn't know what sound was appropriate for a wound. She looked out across the room, letting the silence settle, letting the moment breathe. Then she spoke. When I was a child, she began, my mother cleaned offices after dark. She used to tell me that some people will never see you as a person, only as a role they assign you. Her voice carried without strain. Employee, problem, threat, outsider. A few heads bowed. She continued, the day I built my first company, I promised myself that if I ever had power, I would use it to make rooms bigger, not smaller, because the world is already full of ropes. She paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. Last week, I stood at a rope and listened to people tell me I didn't belong. They didn't verify. They didn't ask. They assumed. Her hands rested on the podium. Steady. I want to say something clearly, she said. This is not about one person having a bad day. This is about a system that makes it easy to humiliate someone and call it policy. A murmur of agreement moved through the room. She lifted her chin slightly. And it's also about what happens when we treat dignity like a privilege instead of a right. Her eyes softened. I could have walked away. I could have avoided the scene. Many people do. Because they are exhausted. They are trying to survive their travel day. They are trying to get home. She paused again, and the room held its breath. But if walking away is the only option available to people who are treated unfairly, she said, then nothing changes. It just repeats, quietly, on someone else. She leaned forward a fraction, voice deepening with truth. Here is what I believe. The measure of a place is not how it treats its most important guests. It's how it treats the person it thinks has no power. That line hit the room like a bell. Some people wrote it down immediately. Some people closed their eyes as if trying to absorb it. She continued, accountability isn't humiliation. Accountability is repair. It is truth. It is consequences that teach. And it is systems rebuilt so the next person doesn't have to stand at a rope and beg to be treated like a human being. Her gaze flicked briefly to the front row where airport staff sat. Uniforms, tired eyes, hands folded in laps. If you work here, she said, I need you to understand something. This is not about making you afraid. This is about making you supported in doing the right thing. Clear procedures. Fair training. Leadership that backs you when you choose dignity over instinct. Then she looked toward the community leaders, the officials. And if you lead, she added, voice calm but cutting through pretense, I need you to understand something too. You don't get to outsource humanity to frontline employees and then act shocked when it fails. A hush. She let it stay. Then she said, softly, I'm not here to take revenge. I'm here to take responsibility. She stepped back from the microphone slightly. I purchased an airport, she said, But I'm not interested in owning people's silence. I'm interested in owning people's trust. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the weight of saying something true in public. So here's my request, she finished. Next time you see someone being treated like they don't belong, don't just record. Don't just whisper. Stand near them. Ask questions. Offer witnesses. Make it harder for cruelty to hide behind procedure. She paused one last time, and her voice dropped to something almost intimate. Because dignity is contagious, she said, and so is disrespect. The only question is, what are we spreading? She stepped away from the podium. This time, the applause came. Not explosive, not performative. A slow, rising thunder of hands that sounded like people choosing, together, to do better. 8 months passed. Airports don't change overnight. They change the way runways get repaired, one section at a time, under bright lights, with crews working while the rest of the world keeps moving. The VIP lounge still had glass doors, still had quiet inside. But the rope was gone. In its place stood an open entry with clear signage. Access verified by scan. No exceptions. No assumptions. A small plaque beneath it read, Dignity First Initiative, estimated 2026. Employees wore new badges with a simple reminder printed under their names. Scan. Listen. Help. Complaints were tracked differently now. Transparent dashboards reviewed monthly by a mixed committee of management, union representatives, and community advisors. Disciplinary outcomes weren't hidden behind corporate fog. Trends were addressed early, not ignored until viral footage forced action. The training wasn't one of those check-the-box videos people clicked through while eating lunch. It was live, interactive, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes healing. They invited travelers with disabilities to describe what it felt like to be doubted. They invited religious leaders to describe what profiling looked like in practice. They invited older travelers to speak about being treated like confusion with legs. They invited Black travelers, especially women, to speak about the particular exhaustion of being questioned for existing. Some sessions ended in tears. Some ended in defensiveness. But they ended, and the next session still happened. The older woman's firm also funded scholarships, aviation engineering, logistics, cybersecurity, airport operations, targeting students from neighborhoods that had historically been served by the airport but never truly benefited from it. They launched a local small business vendor program so terminal kiosks could feature community-owned coffee, bookstores, and boutiques instead of only national chains. A mural appeared near the main concourse. It showed hands, different shades, different ages, passing a suitcase forward, like the airport was a relay of human lives. And near the bottom corner of the mural, in small lettering, someone had painted a quote that had spread beyond the forum. The measure of a place is how it treats the person it thinks has no power. On a Tuesday afternoon, the older woman walked through the terminal again. No cameras this time. No rope. No confrontation. Just the hum of travel, the rolling wheels, the overhead announcements, the smell of cinnamon pretzels and jet fuel, the soft ache of people leaving and arriving. She stopped near a gate where an employee was helping an elderly man who spoke little English. The employee scanned the pass, smiled, and walked him toward his seat with patience that looked practiced, not forced. The older woman watched for a moment. Then she turned and continued toward a window that faced the runway. Planes moved in the distance, huge bodies gliding like slow miracles. Behind her, a young employee recognized her, not from status, but from memory of the clip, the forum, the change. The employee hesitated, then approached. The employee said softly. The older woman turned. The employee swallowed. I wanted to say thank you. My mom works here. She used to come home angry, tired. She said nobody listened. And now, they do. The older woman nodded once, eyes warm. Tell your mother, she said, that her work matters. The employee smiled, eyes shining. I will. As the employee walked away, the older woman faced the runway again. She wasn't thinking about the supervisor, or the attendant, or the guard. She was thinking about the quiet repairs, the ones no clip could capture, The moment someone chose to scan instead of judge. The moment a bystander stood closer instead of looking away. The moment an employee felt protected in choosing dignity. Because ownership wasn't the point. Change was. And she had work to do. Somewhere, in some line, at some rope, in some moment that seems small until it isn't. Someone will be told they don't belong. And maybe you'll be there. Maybe you'll be holding a phone. Maybe you'll be watching, silent, waiting to see how it ends. So here's the question, one you can't scroll past forever. When the world tests someone's dignity in public, will you be part of the crowd or part of the courage?